Branford Marsalis, how are you doing?
What's up, Sean?
Hey man, it's thanks for agreeing to do the program, and you have been quite influential to me. Your music and the bands that you've played in, very influential to me. The first time we met was in 1994
Hmm.
on the Phil Donahue show.
Really?
Yeah,
I
that's
was on Donahue's show.
well, you weren't on the show. So what? The way it worked was we were taping the show in the same studio that the Tonight Show
That's right.
was in,
Yeah, I remember.
and they surprised me by going and getting you and having you come to meet me for the first time on the set there, which was was a real highlight for me. So anyhow, that's how we met, and then we somewhat stayed in touch. It seems like the next time I saw you was it was at a college in Grand Rapids, and it was with your band Buckshot LaFunk.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I stuck around after the show, and we talked a little bit. It was after you had left the Tonight Show
Hmm.
as the MD,
Hmm.
and that was cool. And then we have some folks in common. Rodney Whitaker
Oh, yeah, man.
and also Dr. James Bunty.
Yep. That's my man.
Yeah, yeah. So James was my. I just completed a doctorate saxophone performance, and he was my professor. He was my teacher.
Oh, that's great. Jim's great.
Yeah, and he's super good people. He was a joy to work with, and then okay, so but also Chad Eby.
Yeah, that's my guy.
Yeah, Chad Eby. I actually just talked to Chad Eby earlier today, or texted a little bit earlier today, and this had to be about it. It had to be about 10 years ago. You were the guest artist with the Columbus Jazz Orchestra in
Yeah,
Columbus.
it's been a while.
Yeah, and I was playing in the band,
I remember that.
and yeah, so it's been very different times I've been able to check you out and have some conversation and things. And so again, I'm glad that you are able to you know do this interview. It means a lot.
Pleasure.
So I think people that know your music, they already know probably general information, and so I want to kind of talk about maybe some things that maybe they don't know about as much, and maybe just some things that are just conversational, just things I think you'd be interested in. So your classical playing, which I mean, how long ago did you start focusing on your classical playing?
2002 or three, something like that.
Yeah, and what about classical saxophone was drew you? Like what about it made you want to spend all of those hours practicing that rep?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things in jazz and all other forms of music. Like there are times when the message has more uh, weight than the delivery,
Mm,
and so You can sometimes have sloppy technique, or you can have a certain kind of technique, like linear technique, where everything is, connected in bars of fours, eights, usually fours and eights, not more than fours and eights. And you can surround yourself with music that does not expose your weaknesses. Like in jazz, I mean, there are plenty of songs in the 20s and the 30s that would be very difficult for contemporary thinkers like us to play. We just avoid those songs and we play the stuff we know. But when you're playing classical music and the piece is written, you can't change the key. You can't really deviate from the tempo significantly. You can't find a way to tailor the song to your strength. You have to address your weaknesses. And I was at this point as a musician where, I mean, I was playing jazz and I knew what I was doing and I was pretty good at it. So, I mean, what is it that I can practice that's going to make me better? Because if you start learning scales, the scales are all the same. They're just scales. So you become good at playing scales. But it's not like playing scales challenges your conception about music and makes you feel like you're the worst player on the planet. They're just scales. But when I started playing classical music, I mean, I just felt like I was the worst player on the planet. It was great. It was great because I was just exposed. I mean, I didn't have as much control of the instrument as I thought I did. I could play loud, but I couldn't play soft. I couldn't play downbeats worth a damn because we don't have to play downbeats. We never do play downbeats. How many times do you have a band and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, bang? It just it's, the drummer plays bop, bop, da, bing, and you start playing. I mean, it's never you never have to play on the beat. So for about 2 weeks, I couldn't even play a downbeat like on the beat. So there were a lot of things. It changed my tone because we tend to play 4 and 8 bar phrases. Anything longer than that, your tone starts to waver. We don't play ballads. We don't play them softly. So holding a long note for more than 10 seconds, the tone starts to waver. There's all these things I started to notice. And I was at that age where if I didn't find something, I mean, if you don't find something to challenge you, then you just kind of drop off. Because, I mean, am I really going to go home and practice a blues or go home and practice a tune? I mean, I know how to play the tunes. What am I practicing? What am I practicing for? Just to practice? I mean, so you listen to records of great jazz musicians when they're getting in their older age, and a lot of times those records don't sound very good. Coleman Hawkins being a fantastic exception to that, and Sonny Rollins for a very long time being an exception to that. But yeah, I just wanted to avoid the slippery slope. I wanted to avoid the drop off. There was never in my mind an idea or a possibility to actually play concerts. That wasn't part of my thinking at all. I don't know how that happened. But when it started, I said, okay, this is going to suck, but I'll do it. And then I got better even quicker, because the pressure of that situation is quite amazing. It's an amazing situation to be in. And I was surrounded by a lot of really kind people like, James Bunty and Tim McAllister and Arno Bornkamp in the Netherlands and Niels Bale from the Netherlands. A lot of players. Harvey Patel was my teacher. James Umble, who's over at Youngstown State. I mean, there's all these they were really kind. I'm leaving out people because, Joe Luloff at Michigan State. I mean, a lot of people tried to help me and talk to me and gave me advice. So it's been a really good experience. It's been a long, painful process, but it's paid off.
So one thing I think this is a lot of people, once they get to a certain point in their career, and their knowledge of something are not willing to sort of be broken down to the studs to be built back up.
Right.
I think it says something about your character, what kind of person you are, to be able to handle that even.
It's tricky because by implication, it implies that the people that don't do it have no character or have bad character. You know what I mean? So I don't think of it in those terms. I just think that one of the things I noticed when I moved to New York was that a lot of musicians, their relationship with music in general was rather transactional. They were trying to find a niche or something they could specialize in that they could monetize.
Right.
But I just have always been this guy who loved playing music, and I played with 100% enthusiasm, whether it was the R&B band I played in from 1974 to 1979, it was just, or Wynton's band, or, you know, even when I didn't know how to play jazz well, I loved the idea of playing it, and I would study it and practice it and learn solos and try to get better. I was never really trying to find like one or two things I did that nobody else did that I could claim for myself so that I could declare myself an innovator and find a way to monetize it. It was never part of my thing. I think that's more what it is. It's just, you know, I like playing music, and kind of exhilarating, especially when everybody's trying to tell you how good you are. It's kind of exhilarating to be broken down like that and starting over. That was great. I mean, it made me better for sure. In a lot of ways, it probably kept my career on an upward trajectory rather than a downward trajectory or just a plateau.
You know, that's interesting. So, I mean, I hadn't played any classical saxophone for 14 or 15 years.
Right.
Because, you know, once I finished my master's degree, there was really no work. There's not a lot of work for classical saxophone.
Oh, it's true.
So, you know, and since the jazz part of my career had developed the way that it had, and I had been doing so much stuff that way, it was sort of like the path of least resistance to, you know, to capitalize on that.
Right.
And so when I went back to work on this doctorate in saxophone performance, and I hadn't played any classical saxophone, it was a, you know, in some ways it was a rude awakening.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, and having to deal with, I mean, doing basic things that you think that you ought to be able to do, but for whatever reason they're just not there, and all of the time associated, the different embouchure. You know, one thing I did was during the time I was playing all the recitals and stuff I had to do, I stopped playing alto in a jazz or commercial context.
Right.
So it was all tenor in that context, so that I could totally separate what the alto was. So when I felt an alto, it would help me to dial into that part of my brain.
Right.
And I played on a different horn, obviously a different setup. I even had a different neck strap because I wanted to really make myself feel differently when I played classical. And I didn't want to kind of do it. If I'm going to do this, I want to really do it.
Right.
And that's the way that I tend to be with most things, sometimes to my detriment, because, you know, you only have so much time. Right. So you have to kind of choose at some point. But I remember the first recital I did after, like I said, having not played any classical music for, I mean, I was, you know, I would practice etudes and stuff every once in a while, but I'm talking about getting on the stage, you know, performance ready.
That's different.
Yeah. So 14, 15 years, I play a recital. Man, I was nervous.
That's the only time I've ever been nervous on a bandstand.
Man, I was so nervous. I was so nervous. I'll tell you, one thing I talk to my students about is knowing what your tendencies are when you get nervous so that you can try to devise some strategies that will counteract those, and also so that you're not surprised by them,
Right.
and then that'll make it worse. So for me, one of my tendencies is I get dehydrated because the adrenaline starts to flow, and then it burns up every ounce of water in my body. Now, once I know that I'm thirsty, it's too late,
Mm-hmm.
because what starts to happen is I lose control of the muscles in my face. And I mean, I can't play anything. And so I was going to make sure that that was not going to happen to me. So I drank two 32-ounce Powerades. I drank like two water bottles, or two or three water bottles, and that was before the recital. Then during the recital, I drank like two more water bottles because I wasn't going to have that happen to me. I was still nervous as all get out, but it was, yeah, it's a different thing. And being able to kind of go and study with someone where I didn't have to be on, I didn't have to be the person teaching or providing any information. I could just sit there and learn
Right.
was quite refueling, and it just I needed it more than I realized I did.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I hear you.
Yeah. So one thing that I have quoted you on several times, I mean, all the time, is you were in this documentary on VH1 called "Before the Music Dies."
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I know the quote then.
Yeah. So, if you get 100 people in a room and you have them vote on something, then that guarantees that you're going to get it wrong.
Guarantee yourself the wrong answer.
Yeah, right.
People in the room and have them vote on it. Right.
Yeah.
That's a guy named Mike McGinley. He was Sting's tour accountant, and that was one of his favorite sayings. And the more I thought about it, I'm like, I kind of see his point.
Yeah. So, with the way that all of these reality TV shows and social media and, getting likes for things, I post this, so I got a like, or I didn't get as many likes as I wanted to get.
Right.
I mean, do you see a long-term consequence for that?
I mean, if you're in it, yeah. I mean, my kids are in it. I was
Yeah.
talking to them about that exact same thing today. It's just, yeah, if you're in that. I mean, I think I remember when the whole internet craze first started, and I would talk to musicians, and they say, "Well, man, it's going to change music forever." I'm like, "No, it's really not," because again, they're thinking transactionally, and like it's not going to change. It did change music. It changed the music business, but it didn't. It had nothing to do with what we do. It's so. I mean, what's the hardest problem when you play any kind of like art-oriented music or esoteric music or non-popular music? It's like, how do you? It used to be, how do you fight through the den to get those 100 million listeners to check you out? Suddenly it became a billion. That doesn't make it easier. That makes it harder.
Huh.
If you can't get 1,000 people to hear you, how are you going to get 1 billion people to check you out? You have to do something so ridiculous that has almost nothing to do with music. And then it's so temporary, they're on to the next thing. So the problem with it is that it generates sensation and it generates trends, but it certainly doesn't develop listeners. It doesn't really develop fans, because the whole fan thing in social media is transient. One year, somebody's an influencer and they're super famous. The next year, they said something out untowards and insulted somebody, and everybody
Yeah.
turns on them. I mean, so I use social media for what I use it for and what I really use it for. I mean, if you go to my site, I don't advertise my gigs on it. I just use it as a thought platform. So when I read an article that's interesting, I post it. Sometimes I'll play music, very rarely, but a lot of it is just conversation. And I did an interview, and the guy says, "Well, you don't post music on your social media accounts." I said, "Well, it's not intentional, but no, I don't." And he says, "Why do you think that is?" I said, "Because my music is about the things I read. My music is not about music.
Ah,
Music is an extension of how I feel. It is an extension of what I know. Reason I play better now than I did when I was 16 is because I know more now than I did when I was 16. I'm more, I am not more intellectually curious than I was when I was 16, but because of that curiosity, I know way more. And
right, right.
my relationship with music is totally different now than it was when I was 20 or when I was 30. So what I always talk to my students about is about a process of thinking, because what instrumental music actually is and what it does, and the hardest thing in it is to use the sound of an instrument to create an emotional effect for a listener. And that is an acquired skill. It is not a skill that can be taught. So what I always try to do is I use a very Socratic method when I teach with my students. I want them to identify what's wrong with their playing. I don't want to have to be the person to tell them, because then they always think they need to come to me to get it fixed. My idea is to put you in a place where you can identify your problems and you can fix them. And if you can't, then you can come to me. And that's kind of how I see music in general. It's a reflection of what I think. A lot of times I go to social media. I used to musician sites, and everything in it is about music. I mean, absurd things like, what key is John steps in? I mean, what? It's in B. And then they're like, no, it's really in this, it's really in that. And then the conversation becomes so nerdy that almost all of our conversations are interior conversations, which is
Right.
why nobody likes us. The old days, they understood that you had these two conversations. When you're hanging at the bar with your boys at 4 a.m., you can have an interior conversation. But for audiences, you need to have an exterior conversation. So you need to find a way to use the music you want to play to manipulate audiences, to get them to like it. And one way is to play things that they have the capacity to like. But if you fancy yourself a genius or an innovator, and your strident belief is that the reason jazz is not popular is because the audiences aren't smart enough to dig what we're doing, then you're doomed. Because audiences have been the same. And having played classical music, and having played popular music, and having played secular music, and jazz, and all these other things, all these audiences to me are the same. Because what they really like are songs with a good melody and a good ass beat. That's what they like.
Yeah.
And that's never going to change. I played the Eber Concertino in Orlando. And there's this tricky passage in the thing, where it goes really high and ends up with this chromatic thing with an A, you have to tongue the notes. I rarely ever played that thing right. And I played it in Orlando, and I played it right, and I nailed it. The audience, yay. And then we played some other piece. I think it was a piece by Sally Beamish, this beautiful piece in the audience. Then the orchestra played a piece, and then we played Bolero, and we got a standing ovation. That's no different than what you would expect at a pop music concert, except they have 11 boleros a night. You know what I mean? So it's like
Right.
But us, we have no boleros. There are boleros versions of that in jazz. We don't play them because we think that jazz is a vehicle for us to present how good we think we are. The whole thing becomes detached. So people sit there and they watch it and they try to like it, but there's nothing for them to like. So what we do as the band is we try to learn how to play everything stylistically. So that way we can just tailor the show to whatever the audience is. and you place one of your songs and they're into it, great, we'll keep doing it. And when they waver a little bit, then we'll go play something from the 30s. We'll play Sunny Side of the Street real slow
Mm-hmm.
and draw them in, and then hit them over the head with one of our things again. And what I started to notice is people would stand in the line to meet you after the concert, and they would say things like, "Oh, I sure did like when y'all did that blues," or "I really did like the St. Louis blues." And what they're telling you is, "Yeah, do more like that." So all that other shit y'all were doing, okay, whatever that was, yeah, I guess y'all like it, but you know, I'll come
Mm-hmm.
back and check you out because you played one thing that I like. So it's one of these things that as you get older, you understand. I mean, you can, because there are guys that don't do that. I mean, Chick doesn't do it. Keith Jarrett didn't really. Well, he did play a bunch of standards. He did it after a while. They play with Miles, man. You know what I mean? It's like when you play with Miles, that's a whole different thing. People
Mm-hmm.
react to you differently if you were part of a principal player in the Miles Davis fraternity. But in our times, in the modern times, and the stuff we're dealing with, and audiences, when you are lucky enough to have normal audiences come to your shows, because I mean some concerts is like guitar player shows up and it's like 75% guitar players. Then it's just nerd away. I mean, if it's really hard to sustain that audience a long periods of time. There are exceptions to that rule, but you you have to find a way to you know bridge that chasm. And the solution is never to have people who work hard for a living going to take a harmony class to figure out what the hell we're doing. So we do things for us, and then we've learned how to do things for the
Right.
audience. And all of that is centered around just having a regular kind of understanding, a social understanding of people, which growing up in New Orleans, I've always kind of had that anyway. So, we laugh a lot on stage. We're like some four fools on the stage. We make fun of each other. We make mistakes. We laugh. Audiences love seeing that because audiences, with the exception of Germany, are like the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. So it would be like Germany, the Czech Republic, Hungary, uh, like Latvia. Like when you in Poland, you play in those places, they actually hear the music and they hear the energy. But in most places, I mean, people hear with their eyes, which is why in the United States, the operative verb for concert attendance is see, not hear. All your friends say, "I can't wait to see you tonight." They don't say, "Can't wait to hear you tonight." Uh, it's not an accident. And then some people say, "Oh, that's just what we say." No, it's not. I mean, it's the thing. I mean, so people notice you. Say, "Why do you guys wear suits?" I said, "Because people notice." You know, sometimes you guys look like you're not serious. Well, we're serious when we play, but when we're not playing, people notice. They like that. They like seeing musicians that look like they enjoy themselves, like each other,
Mm-hmm.
and enjoy playing music. And we just happen to do that. It's not an act. I mean, we do enjoy hanging around each other. We do like in this crazy stuff, we wind up doing a Zoom call once every couple of weeks, and then we're on the Zoom for 2 hours, just talking trash. I mean, we get along really well, and that's great.
So one thing I've heard you say pretty frequently is just this idea that there's been an explosion of technical facility in it's like the younger players today, they have more facility than or as much as anyone ever
Oh, they have
had.
more. They have more than most guys. They have as much as like Coltrane was like the guy for that.
Mhm.
But
And,
you think
and
about like Coleman Hawkins or Lester Young or Stan Getz, they have way more technical facility than those guys. They don't play music better than them. They play the
right,
saxophone better than them.
right. So there's a lot of leaning on the technique. I trust that you've enjoyed the video so far. Please subscribe, comment, share, like, and also you can go over to my Patreon. The link is in the description if you'd like to further support. Thank you. Now back to the video. and not as much necessarily making music.
Right.
And in addition to that, I think that my generation, I'm 45.
Mm.
So my generation and the generation after me, in particular, really struggled with identity with respect to why it is that we are playing music. Why are we engaging in the arts?
Right.
And we say a lot of things like, you know, I'm playing for myself. You
Yeah.
know, I'm playing because, you know, it makes me happy. You have to do this for yourself.
Right.
Make yourself happy first. You know, all of this kind of really kind of self-absorbed kind of conversation,
Right.
self-absorbed kind of monologue. and and I think I fell victim to the same thing. And, you know, but when I saw that an inherent issue with that is that, yeah, you can, I mean, I think there's some truth to the idea that you have to be pleased with what you are doing so that you can get behind it, so you can be assertive with what it is that you're doing. You have to believe in and be about what it is that you're doing. So I don't have an issue with that. But I do have the issue with the idea that the audience is supposed to come your way. That seems to me to be backwards. I think you can enjoy what it is that you're doing, but you can also cater to the audience.
Well, you have to learn how to play, but you have to like jazz to do that. To be fair, a lot of the guys you're talking about, they like playing the saxophone more than they like jazz. They don't really like jazz. You know, that's why
Mm.
jazz is just a vehicle to them. You know, and because the songs from the 20s and the 30s and the 40s that most musicians know are the ones that allow you to play, uh, you know, linear conceptions without splitting up your ability to tie these harmonic phrases together. There's so many songs in the canon that would not allow you to do that, and the solution is to just not play those songs.
Huh.
So there's a built-in weakness in that way of playing, but that way of playing attracts, you know, certain kind of mindsets. You know, guys who are generally kind of loners. They practice all day long. They practice by themselves. They're not what I call in the center of society. Like when you think about Miles and Lester Young and Coleman Hawkins and Max and Dizzy Gillespie and all those guys, Stan Getz, Billy, they were kind of in the center of society. Like you could talk to them about a lot of things. You could talk to them about horse racing, about boxing, about football. They were aware of all of these things. They went and checked out other musicians. Train was less like that. Train was like really introverted and really into his thing, and he did his thing. But he also understood that that wasn't a successful, that was not ultimately going to be successful for him. So he kind of upped and joined Earl Bostic's band because he understood that to play jazz well, he had to have some kind of understanding of that particular R&B sound.
Hmm.
So he joined Earl Bostic's band, and I have a really great recording of him playing a jump blues with Johnny Hodges' band. And Johnny Hodges was the first guy he tried to emulate. Most people say it was Charlie Parker. It wasn't. It was Johnny Hodges. So Johnny found out about it, called him for a gig in like 54. And he's playing this jump blues in A flat, and he's killing it. And you would never think it was Train. And there's all these things he knew how to do that people who follow him don't know how to do. They don't know how to play the blues. They don't know how to play ballads. Coltrane was one of the most disciplined ballad players ever. You
Oh
listen
yeah.
to him playing with doing the record. Well, first just beautiful ballads, but the the ballads record, which I don't think was actually his record. I think it was like a compilation they put together later. I don't is gorgeous. But if you listen to him playing with Johnny Hodges, he never steps on Johnny Hodges. He basically plays when Johnny doesn't sing or complements what Johnny is singing. You listen to modern players, they don't even know how to do that. They just play. They're just playing. They don't even, and I mean, if you listen to a song like, what was that song? Like Tunji is one, and then there's another one where there's a blues where he doesn't play any fast notes at all.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't play anything. He's just so, you know, he understood so many things about music that we don't give him credit for. Everybody's just all, you know, over the moon about 1957 because you can teach it. You can teach giant steps. You can teach countdown. You can teach, you know, was it, I never get that, 26-2, is that the name of that song?
Yeah, 26-2.
Yeah, you can teach that. You can't teach how to play a ballad. The student has to develop an imagination. There is no schematic that works. You can develop a schematic for giant steps. You can play it real fast. The downside to that is every time you play it, that's it. So if you go to hear somebody enough times, you say, oh, okay, he has his solo that he plays over and over and over. But, you know, Coltrane didn't play My Favorite Things because it was the best possible song he could play at the time, but it was certainly one of the more effective songs that he could play at the time. Because what the early jazz guys figured out, the early, like Coleman Hawkins was one of the first to I think really peak this, was that people inherently in this country don't like instrumental music. They just don't like it. So one of the ways you can get them to like it is if you play songs they already know. So Body and Soul was a big hit before Hawk did it. So when Hawk did Body, because when I always talk about the importance of melody, someone will invariably raise their hand and say, well, Coleman Hawkins had a hit record and he never had to play the melody. I said, because people already knew the melody. Body and Soul was a singing hit before Coleman Hawkins' version. So people were already familiar with the song when he played it. And he did a great job of playing things that are all, you know, he didn't play linear anything. He was an arpeggiator. So he had a couple of tricks, but it's mostly arpeggiated. So it lines up right with the melody when he plays. And, you know, when Coltrane did, you know, so a lot of guys realize you've got to play certain songs because they have a strong melody and a great beat. And when Train, and I'm pretty sure he got it from listening to, I mean, I can't prove it. I should have asked, but when I was younger, it would never occur to me to ask that question. But if you listen to Dave Brubeck's band on Time Out playing Take 5, the thing that makes it work is that everybody in the band is completely disciplined. So Brubeck would go do-dit-do-dit-da-da forever. The bass player would play boom, bing, boom, boom, bing, boom, boom, and that's what makes it work. It has more of a drone effect. It's repetitive, but none of the musicians suddenly had this massive talent attack, is what I call it, and say, oh man, you know, I should just throw in a flat five substitution because it's hip. You just stay the course. You stay the course.
Yeah.
What can I do to bring attention to me? Boom, boom, boom. No, none of that shit. He just plays the part. So you listen to training them playing My Favorite Things. All right. Jimmy Garrison had two parts. When they play da dee dee da da, he goes dum, be dum, be dum, be dum. But then when he gets to the vamp, he goes dee dum, boom, boom, ting, ding dong, over. That's it. That's what he plays the entire time, and that's what makes it work. Now other people will play the song, and the bass player is playing what he wants. Everybody's playing what they want, and the drummer's going crazy, and it's a disaster because they don't have the kind of musical discipline. They don't understand the power of understanding your function in the group. Because in modern players, because they're not jazz fans really, they're just players. They love playing. They want to hire the best players they can, and everybody has equality on the stage, which is why it always sucks. Because you can't have equality on the stage. You know, you
Mm.
can't, not in the way that they see it, because like a bass player to me is kind of like the center on a football team. So imagine if you had a center on a football team who could run as fast as the wide receivers, could probably catch a couple of passes, could throw a ball well as the quarterback, and can't block worth a damn. That's modern bass playing. They can do all of these things. They can't hold it. They can't hold down the fort. They can't block. And then if you ask the bass player, "Hey man, I just need you to like be the anchor. I need you to play quarter notes." In their mind, they say, "Well, man, you're holding me down." Like they don't even understand the function of their instrument in a jazz context, in a traditional jazz context. And then they'll say, "Well, that's not what Pell Danielson did with Keith Jarrett's band, or that's not what Miroslav Vitus did when he was playing with Miles." I'm like, all right, man, you just can't play with me. It's cool. You can go play with those other guys. It's great. But everybody in the band, we understand what our function is. It's not just you can play whatever you want whenever you want. It's like we have a song. Every song needs to be an arc, or almost every song. We do have those peaks and valley songs. We try to, we don't, so because when I first got to New York, everybody wants to have like the high end climax on every solo, on every song. So if you have 5 or 6 musicians on the stage, which you have, or 5 or 6 musicians, high solo drops, builds back up, high solo drops, builds back up, high solo. It's the repetition of it. So the whole idea is that for me, the first soloist gets to about here, second soloist gets to here, and then everything works its way down. And depending on the song, either I get the climax or Joey gets it, or sometimes Justin gets it, or sometimes Reeves gets it. But we can't have all 4 of us doing that on the same damn song. It's just because then it people already have the perception that jazz sounds the same because you only got 12 notes and those notes are going to repeat themselves. So the way that you can change the way people feel about jazz is to make sure that all the songs don't feel the same.
Right.
There's no way you're going to get them to be able to hear notes individually with that kind of specificity. They're not musicians. It's an acquired skill. We didn't, nobody, my dad didn't put on a Charlie Parker record when I was 8 and I said, "That's killing," and start singing along with it. No, you develop these things. And there's no reason that audiences should want to or need to develop any of that stuff. So the thing that they can do is if some songs are intense, if other songs are happy, if other songs are sad, some songs are angry, you're changing the moods, you're changing the way they feel. They love that because that breaks up the monotony. But if your only focus is about your solo, I heard something when I moved to New York. I'd never heard it all my times in New York. Guy finishes the gig and says, "Hey man, what do you think about my solo on the third song?" I'm 20 years old. I'm like, what? I thought that was my best solo. I'm like, "Oh yeah, well, okay." I really wasn't listening for your solo on the third song. I was trying to figure out what the hell was going on. But okay, bro, which one do you think was your best? I said, "None of them. I don't really think like that. I'm trying to play the tune." And if we sound good, then it's good. Even if I sound like crap, if we sound good, it's good. But if it sounds like crap and I'm good, it sounds like crap.
Yeah.
So a lot of that comes from just liking jazz enough to learn jazz. And I don't blame it on youth. Like the younger generation. I mean, they said that shit about us when we got to New York. You cats don't. I said, "Man, I don't know anything, but I'm going to learn." Because I didn't know anything. And all those guys, "You don't know anything." I said, "I'm well aware of that, but I'm going to learn it." And every year they were nicer. So like, "Hey man, you getting that way? You need to check this out." Okay, let me go check that out. And it's not like now where you can just pull up a phone and say, Jay McShann. I mean, you go to Power Records and say, "I need a Jay McShann record." And they go, "Who?" Or like the other time I said, "I need to get this John Coltrane record." And he said, "What's the name of the record?" And it was like Africa Brass or something like that. They said, yeah, we don't have that. We don't even have it in the catalog. I said, you don't have it in the catalog. They said, nope. Coltrane, right? Coldtrain. If there's anybody that
Cold train.
is there anybody back there that knows anything about jazz, because you are not it. He goes, oh, I'm sorry, man. And then this young lady came up. Because I know John Coltrane. I said, can you spell it? She goes, yes, I can. Africa Brass. How long does it take? She goes, oh, 6 weeks. And this is 90 whatever. So then I went to Amazon and they said, we'll get it to you in 2 days. And that started my thing with Amazon. It was like, I want to
Yeah.
get this record, can't get it. It's like, but that was always the thing. Can't get it. Not available. Can't get it. It'll take 6 weeks. Never heard of it. Out of print. Because Blakey and those guys are like, oh man, you got to check this band out. Have you ever heard Fletcher Henderson's band in 27 when Coleman Hawkins was playing? No. Try finding that shit. But now, bam, there it is. And that's more to the point that I tell my students. Y'all have access to the entire history of jazz. There are records that are not really in print, available because of digitization. That
Yeah.
would have been too cost prohibitive to actually reprint. And y'all don't check out none of it.
Do you think that because of the the easy access of all this information that it makes it somehow common and then
No,
therefore not as valuable?
no, it's valuable as hell to me. I'm grateful because, like I told you, I've been wanting to listen to that record for a long time. Forgot about it. Somebody mentioned it. I popped it up and it showed up. No, I'm listening to it now. I'm digging.
Well, that's not what I mean. I don't mean to you, and I don't mean to me either.
No, they don't like
I,
jazz. They just don't like it because when it wasn't available in the 90s or the 80s, they didn't try to get it. Nobody was trying to get it. Everybody was, hey man, you want to know what I'm working on? And I said, what? They said, what are you working on? I said, I'm learning solos. Oh man, I'm working on concepts. They didn't want, they didn't want to play jazz. They wanted jazz was the vehicle that they were going to use to get whatever they thought that they were. I was having a conversation about religion / spirituality with a guy who was declared an atheist. And as we would talk, I would just say, well, that can't be the reason. That doesn't make any sense. And then finally, he says it. I've been working on concepts for years that nobody has thought of. Why would I give credit for that to an invisible deity? I did it. It's all mine. And in my mind, I went, yeah, it sure is. You can have it.
huh. Yeah.
It's not like a famous person. It was just like this guy who just thought he was like, New York was not ready for him. And 25 years later, he's right. New York's still not ready for him. That's how it is. But it's, it's you got to have a certain kind of spirituality to play music in general. You can't just, you don't have to. You really don't have to. There will be a space, for some person who has like the data-driven music. There's a place for that. It's not concert halls. There's a place for that, and there should be a place for that. But when you talk to people who write about jazz, they're always looking for new stuff. So and because they don't have the best ears in the world, like you have a guy who's playing Lester Young stuff. And then you have another guy playing Lester Young stuff. And one of them does it a lot better than the other one. But to the writers, they're like, well, it's both archaic because it's Lester Young and I've already heard that. So I want to find something new. Well, the best way to be new in jazz is to play jazz tunes and have no jazz vocabulary at all. Everything you play is new. And that's kind of what's happening out there. And then guys say, this is the new guy, listen to this stuff. It's new, no one's ever, and I'm not. Like, I don't want that kind of attention. So I'm not going to be in interviews saying, these guys are you know, in name wise, horrible, and people should be listening to me. It's just, but I'm watching it happen and going, yeah, okay, well, let's just go and let's just go play, man. The hell with it, you know. Let's just go play. But no, I don't think I don't think that the music is less valued because it's more available. I think it's less valued because the people who are playing jazz in quotes, they don't value it.
Hmm.
They just don't value it.
You know, there seems to be, and this is, so I worked at so I'm a minister of music at a church.
Mm,
It's a missionary Baptist church.
mm.
It's a, it was actually one of the oldest black churches in Ohio. The first minister of the church is like 184 years old or something. The
Wow.
first minister of the church was an abolitionist,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Very cool.
So this was in, prior to working at this church, but you know, I've worked at a few different churches, and I'm not trying to out anybody or anything, but in mega churches, there seems to be this conversation about trending younger,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and the, of course, the problem that I have with that concept is that young people don't know anything.
Correct.
And so by trending younger, you're also trending dumber, you know, and if your goal is to promote, you have these age old concepts like master and apprentice, right? If the reason for that is because the master is older and wiser and actually knows what's going on, and the apprentice is younger and dumber, doesn't know what's going on yet, and so they listen and they wait a long time to speak. They don't actually say anything because they know that they don't know anything. But I think these sort of the sort of encouraging young people, you have a voice and you have a this and that. It's like when I was young, that's not the way that my dad talked to me.
Right.
You know, and he wasn't trying to shut down every idea that I had, but it, I knew that my place was to listen and to absorb what was going on, and it was not to try to be the leader, because I'm too young and dumb to try to be the leader. I feel like there's like this epidemic of this, and we see it in the universities, where teachers are like dumbing the information down. It's like, well, what does the student want? You got to give the student what the student wants. Well, the student doesn't know what they should want, because didn't they come here to study with me? you know aren't I supposed to know what they what to give them? So
It's all monetization, man. Saying, I remember when I was playing with Sting. We went to at the same time as Michael Jackson's band,
mm,
and he always had big turnover on his band from tour to tour. Like he'd have the same musical director, which was great, because Greg Fillinganes was amazing. But he would have this big turnover because, I mean, they would underpay the musicians and say, this is a great opportunity for you. You get to play in front of 80,000 people a night, and everybody's going to know your name. Well, they're not going to know you. Michael never introduces you except once in the show. And at the end of the show, the names are going by so fast. And most people aren't interested anyway. So like there was a guy from New Orleans named, I think it was Jonathan Moffett was a drummer. He played with Michael for a couple of tours. He was great. And then eventually he was replaced with a younger guy. And the reason is clear. You don't have to pay him.
mm,
Just don't have to pay him as much as you'd have to pay the master. And if the job we're talking about doesn't require the kind of skill where it needs a master, you fire the master and you hire the apprentice. Pay them less. So, and all of that, it's about the youth, it's about this. Yeah, okay, that's true. But the one thing that the youth don't know is how much to charge. They just happy to be there. And then when they get savvy to that and say, you know, guys, I was thinking, I would do for a raise, then they will be replaced by the next youngest person. It's all about commodity, providing the service. It's kind of gone those days when like the music was. It's still in places where the music in the church service was an integral part of the service experience.
Yeah.
Now it's just like down here in Durham, we got some great churches down here, and a lot of the music directors are. I know a lot of them. They went to North Carolina Central where I teach. I mean, it's great here. It's really great down here. But like you said, the mega churches, it's just high turnaround.
Yeah, I mean, we could go into like a different direction with this. I don't want to go too far down this sort of rabbit hole, but
Right.
one thing that is different about a missionary Baptist church from a mega church or like a Southern Baptist church that's basically like a big evangelical church
Right.
is that the music is very much interwoven and a critical component of the entire service.
Right.
Not just sort of segregated from the service.
Right.
So here's the 20 minutes for you to do the music, and then the rest of it is going to be maybe stuff on the jumbotrons, doing announcements and stuff like this. And there'll be music for that stuff, but it's like that stuff that they it's like licensed music. They went to a website and got the
Right.
licensed music, but in the black church, and in particular in Baptist church and like AME churches,
Right.
you need that organ, right? Because the organ is
Mm-hmm.
married to everything,
Yeah.
and it's not really about the music per se. It's about the experience. It's about how everything is intertwined.
Right.
You have this call and response that's happening, right? And it seems that that whole call and response, that's been lost also. I mean,
Well, it's
because
not lost. It's around. It's just not as prevalent as it used to be.
well, what I mean by lost is lost in a mega church context,
Oh, well, yeah. It was never there.
right?
It was never there in the first place to be lost. It wasn't. That's a completely different thing.
Yeah,
It's just a different thing. But there's these churches all over the country now. These what is it? United House of Prayer.
mm.
Where they have these like these trombone choruses. There's one in New York. There's one in Charlotte, and it's like this is some of the most incredible music. I have to send you some of this stuff, man.
Oh, please do.
It's like old school. Like there's one band, the band in Charlotte is like, oh my God, 20 trombones
Hmm.
with a bass drum and a snare drum. Like an old New Orleans band, the bass drum player and the snare drum player and a woman playing the tambourine. And it is just stunningly beautiful stuff.
Yeah, please do share that with me.
I will. I will.
Well, Branford, I so appreciate again your time, your energy. Thanks for doing this interview.
Yeah, bruh.
And is there anything that you'd like to plug, or something, maybe some final words, something that you want to say that we didn't talk about?
Nope. No.
All right. Well, again, thanks so much, and I look forward to our next time playing, playing together, or conversation
Yeah,
in person.
yeah, I'm learning in this thing. You know, I have one classical piece I'm working on, and I'm learning one Coleman Hawkins solo a week.
Hey, let me. I did want to ask you this. What is your setup? This is a nerdy question, and most folks are not going to
On
know about.
what, tenor?
On your so for your classical alto setup.
Okay, it is a Yamaha. I never remember what they call them, ESX, something like that. You know, it's a Yamaha. Hell, it's right here. Hold on. So it's a Yamaha Custom EX,
Right.
and the mouthpiece is, what do they call this mouthpiece? An AP3 Van Doren, and I play the Van Doren reed is in between a 3.5 and a 3.
Okay. Are
Because
you playing like the V12s?
no, just the blue box.
The blue box. Okay. And is that like a Mio ligature?
No, it's just a ligature. It's a Van Doren ligature.
Okay.
It's not a special. It's not a special ligature at all.
Yeah.
But I just, uh, I mean, I'm kind of, the sound comes from the human, not from the instrument.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
oh, this makes it warmer. This makes it, no, I make it warmer. I make it brighter. I make it darker. It's like whatever sound I have in my head, and I know this. This is not some, whatever sound that I have in my head is the sound that I will ultimately reproduce.
Hmm.
If they say this embouchure makes the sound brighter, all right, it will for a little while, but eventually I'm going to find a way to make it play the sound that I have in my head.
Now, did you have to go through a significant embouchure change to deal with the classical?
Yeah.
And is it like a hard cushion? Is there a lot of pressure on your uh, on your uh, on your bottom teeth when
Yeah.
you're playing?
I mean, I don't bite through the mouthpieces anymore.
Yeah,
I
it's
still bite them a little bit, but for me, it was just, it had to be more elevated
mm-hmm.
so that the air, because when the air comes out of your mouth is shaped conically. It's a conical shape. So the air doesn't go out this way, it goes around and down. So especially on the alto, you have to position the neck in a place where it allows the air to go down into it. We tend to play, you know, too low. So the sound bounces. That's why when you hear a lot of jazz guys, we always like guys subtone in the low area of the horn because that's the only way they can get it out. They,
Mm-hmm.
or they can blast it out. They play it real loud or real soft and nothing in between. And that's just because there's too much bottom pressure.
Mm.
So Harvey
Now,
got me off of the bottom pressure thing. And it took me a long time to learn how to subtone again.
now, how about uh, your your mouthpiece pitch? Because that's one thing that from jazz to classical tends to be different. The jazz pitch usually coming out of the mouthpiece is usually lower, and the classical pitch is usually higher.
Yeah.
Is that the case for you?
No, I don't use what they call jazz mouthpieces on anything.
Oh, I
I,
see.
I just use what used to be called a mouthpiece. I use
Hmm.
what is considered to be I don't have a baffle in any of my mouthpieces.
I see.
They're baffleless. The difference is that one is a size 5 and the other one is a size 7.25.
Hmm. Okay.
That's what the difference is. But I really grew to dislike baffles because the whole purpose of the baffle was to make it easier to play high notes. Like that's what the baffle does. It allows you to play high notes easier, and the tone becomes much brighter, which I've never been a fan of.
Hmm.
So, especially after I started, studying classical music, I mean, Those guys play crazy artisanal stuff, and they don't need to cheat. They just nail it.
Right.
They just nail it. You
That's
know,
right.
so yeah. I mean, it's been a better move for me to move away from the baffle. So no, uh, no, the pitch is just the pitch.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much
Thanks,
for that information.
sir.
I'll see you later. Be safe.
All right, you too, bro. Take care.
All right. All right now.